Hey book readers. One of the most asked questions that I get from readers who have not read anything from Sarah J. Maas is, which book series should I start with? So I'm going to tell you about each series, how they are different, what they're about, and then give you my personal recommendation on what I think you should read first, and then you can take all of the information and make an educated decision for yourself. Sarah J. Maas has 3 different series. The first series that she wrote is called Throne of Glass. It has 8 books, and it is a completed series. So you get a complete story from beginning to end. However, I will say, in one interview, Sarah J. Maas herself said, Throne of Glass is a completed series. But is it? And that was all she said. So she knows what she's doing. She's dangling the carrot in front of us of maybe one day she'll add more to it. But as of now, it's a completed series. It was written for the young adult audience. She started it when she was 15 or 16. And then it kind of gets more mature as she got more mature and older as she was writing. But it's very low explicit content, very minimal spice, low profanity. It has a lot of war and political intrigue, rebellion, overthrowing the powers that be, and a whole host of characters and storylines and plot lines that are very interesting. The next series that she started was A Court of Thorns and Roses. So currently it has 4.5 books because she has one novella between book 3 and book 4 that is kind of considered a half. It's not considered a full book. So 4 books, and it is incomplete. The book that she is currently writing right now is the next book in the ACOTAR series. It also started as written for young adult, really turned more new adult, has some adult content with some spicy scenes. The first 3 books have lower spice. The last book is very high spice because it's part of the plot line. As a reader who prefers less spice, all of them can be read while skipping the spice if that's something you're interested in. For this series, I always describe it as a romance and a fantasy with a little bit more weight put on the romance, with more weight on the love stories. This is essentially where Sarah J. Maas created the entire new genre of romantasy, where it's romance and fantasy, but really a little bit more romance. So this is the series that I always recommend for first-time fantasy readers as a perfect gateway book to fantasy because it is easy to comprehend. Nothing's going to go over your head. There's not a lot of world building you have to follow. It's pretty much a very straightforward world with a love story and a little bit of magic. Doable for anybody. I know so many readers who have been converted to fantasy readers after reading this series, and I love to hear it. I'm here for it. And the next series she wrote is the Crescent City series, and this is the one that just had the most recent release. So it has 3 books right now, and she has said, as of right now, these are the only contracted books of this series, but in this series there are 4 houses, and each book of the series is a title of a house. So she kind of has implied, like, there's probably going to be one more for the other house that she hasn't written a title for yet, but we don't know anything about this, if it's contracted, when the date will be. We don't know details, except for she said there will be more to the story eventually down the line, but we're going to have to wait a bit because she has other books coming first. And then Crescent City differs from the other 2 books because it is Sarah J. Maas's first adult series. It is written for adults. It has a high amount of profanity. It has multiple explicit content, on-page intimacy scenes. The first book only has 1. The second book has a lot more spice, and the third book has just a handful. It's kind of widespread, but definitely adult content. And then on top of all of that, it really has mature themes. Partying and doing drugs, murder, and things like that going on. So a little bit of a different vibe. The other big reason that this series is different from her others is because it's an urban fantasy. So your typical fantasy is, it's kind of like in the olden days. There's swords, there's bows and arrows, there's no technology, we have everything's lit by candles or magic, things like that. In this series, it's urban fantasy. So we have cell phones, we have guns, we have technology. It's a lot different vibe than the other 2. It's also an investigative murder mystery. So the entire book 1 is investigating a murder and a set of murders. Much different than the other 2 and very excellent in its own way. Also, I would describe it as a high fantasy. So it's very detailed, a lot of world building, a lot to follow along with. It's going to take a lot of brain power to read, whereas ACOTAR, not nearly as much brain power required to understand what's going on. That's how each one is different. Things that I always say to people. For Throne of Glass, I loved all of the books. I thought all of them were really good, but I've run across several readers who start it. They don't love book 1. They're like, man, 8 books is a commitment. I say keep going, okay? I enjoyed book 1 and 2 perfectly fine. I wasn't head over heels in love. Book 3 is The Assassin's Blade. Decide, which is a prequel, so it gives you more background information, but book 4 is where you really start falling in love, okay? For the Throne of Glass, if you start it and you're not sure, I always say give it until Queen of Shadows before you decide, because Queen of Shadows is really where you will be totally all in, and if you're not, it might not be for you, and that's okay. Same thing with ACOTAR. I always recommend to people, if you pick up A Court of Thorns and Roses book 1, just tell yourself you're committed to reading book 2 also, because book 1 is but a glimpse of what the entire series is. I often describe it as an extended prologue because it's a really good story on its own, but once you read the rest of the books, you realize you just had a taste of the world and of the characters and of the settings. So please, if you read A Court of Thorns and Roses, commit that you're also going to read A Court of Mist and Fury. And then if you don't like it, that's fine. It's not for you. No worries. So my personal recommendation for anyone considering Sarah J. Maas books and they don't know where to start, I recommend starting with ACOTAR. It's a perfect series for somebody who's not necessarily familiar with fantasy because it's heavy on the romance. It has a very good love story that will pull at all your heartstrings, and you can see if you will like Sarah J. Maas's style of writing or not. And then when you do, you'll be ready for an 8-book commitment, and you'll be ready for a highly detailed world in Crescent City and in Throne of Glass. So my recommendation is A Court of Thorns and Roses first, and then after that, it really just depends on what amount of books you're ready to commit to. Are you ready to commit to 8 books, or are you going to stick with 3 and see where you go? I read it as ACOTAR first, and then Crescent City, and then the Throne of Glass series, simply because 8 books was overwhelming to me. It was quite a commitment. I had to space it out a little bit. I'm the kind of fantasy reader where I need to read a fantasy and then like 5 rom-coms in between to give my brain a break, and then I can pick up the next one, which is what I did for the entire Throne of Glass series. So I read it over several months until the end. When you get to the last few books, you're like, I need to read them back to back because she has major cliffhangers. In fact, there is a major controversy about the reading order of the Throne of Glass series. I have a complete video describing why there's controversy, why it can't be straightforward of what to read, so you can go and watch that to get all the details. But Sarah J. Maas herself has given her recommendation, which is the same thing that I've always recommended, publication order, where you start with Throne of Glass, then you read Crown of Midnight, then you read The Assassin's Blade, then Heir of Fire, Queen of Shadows, Empire of Storms, Tower of Dawn, Kingdom of Ash. You can watch my video if you want all the details in the controversy, but it is a whole new world. Sarah J. Maas has incredible talent of writing, of building worlds that are so complex with so many characters, where she makes you feel so many things and things that you don't expect to happen, and twists and crazy endings that you will love. These are my personal recommendations. That's how I read it, and of course now I'm just reading as they're released because now I'm all caught up, and I highly recommend them to you also. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you read them, shoot me a DM on Instagram. If you read them, I would love to hear your thoughts. I always love talking about Sarah J. Maas books. One more thing I want to add, if you are a reader who's considering Sarah J. Maas and you're not sure if she's for you, perhaps you've seen viral videos saying this and that about the series, and I just want you to know this series has such depth and so many more profound things than just some spicy scenes with the reputation it's being given on TikTok and on Bookstagram. So several of the books definitely have spicy scenes and you can read them for sure, but if you don't want to read them, or if you're not here for just that, this is still the series for you. That's not a reason for you to not read it. Her writing abilities are phenomenal, and I have never read anyone like it. I have never read anyone who has the ability to make me care about the welfare of a large amount of characters while not leaving me behind with not knowing what's going on, while not making me confused about who is who, making me entranced in the world and like this new creative place that she's written. If you're not sure if she's for you or not, just try 1 book, try 2 books. And if it's not, that's okay. Not every book is for every reader, and that's perfectly fine. There's books that are going to be for you and books that aren't for you that are going to be for someone else. I just love helping readers find books that they love and helping authors find readers that will love them. Of course, because I am biased by loving everything she's written, I highly recommend you give it a try, but if you don't, that's all right. And then the hoodie I'm wearing is my embroidered Books Make Life Better hoodie from the apparel collection that I designed and I have for sale on my website, reallifebookreviewer.com. A lot of different choices of hoodies, sweatshirts, t-shirts, different designs with embroidered and printed. If you're interested in bookish apparel, you can check that out. And as always, subscribe if you want to follow along and talk more books, because we all know books make life better.